Okay, let's dive right into this explainer and uncover a pretty surprising truth about humanity's journey to the stars. When we look up at the night sky, it's incredibly tempting to believe that our greatest cosmic achievements have been driven purely by this noble scientific curiosity. We all want to believe that, right? But the source material we're looking at today reveals a much more complex and frankly fascinating reality. The hidden engine actually powering space exploration isn't just human wonder, it's geopolitical fear.
So let's start with a massive mystery that honestly puzzles so many of us. Humanity hasn't set foot on the moon since 1972. Think about that for a second. It's a fact that feels completely counterintuitive when you consider the absolute breakneck pace of technological advancement we've had since then. I mean, your smartphone has more computing power than the Apollo missions. Answering this question will completely reframe how you look at the history of spaceflight. And to do that, we really have to go back to the very beginning.
Section 1. The Sputnik Freakout. October 1957. To truly understand our space ambitions, we gotta rewind to the sheer unfiltered panic of October 1957. On October 4th, the Soviet Union launched Sputnik 1. Now, this wasn't just some harmless metal sphere with a little beeping radio transmitter. It was launched in a hollowed-out intercontinental ballistic missile shell. The military implication here was immediate, and it was horrifying to the US. Think about it. If the Soviets could send an ICBM into orbit, they could easily put a nuclear warhead in it. Plus, since space sits way above national airspace, there was zero existing treaties preventing them from flying right over the United States.
And just look at this rapid-fire progression. In 1957, the Soviets launched the first satellite. That exact same year, they launched the first animal, a little dog from the streets of Moscow. By 1961, they put the first human, Yuri Gagarin, into orbit. They were absolutely dominating in highly visible science, technology, engineering, and math. For the free market, high-tech United States, getting completely bested at its own game by a communist rival sparked a massive, deep-seated wave of military and cultural anxiety.
Which brings us to Section 2, Moving the Finish Line, the Apollo Project.
Because America was losing and losing badly, the rules of the game basically had to be changed to secure a win. Just 6 weeks after Yuri Gagarin orbited the Earth, President John F. Kennedy addressed a joint session of Congress, but he didn't frame the mission as science. He framed it as an existential battle, saying we needed to show the world the path of freedom over the path of tyranny. Kennedy used the stirring anti-communist battle cry for a very practical reason. It was quite literally the only way to get Congress to write the massive, unprecedented checks required. By setting a brand new, incredibly distant finish line, the moon, the US gave itself a fighting chance to leapfrog all those intermediate Russian advances.
So, the newly minted civilian agency, NASA, methodically structured its programs to rapidly scale up capabilities. And it stepped up perfectly. Project Mercury hosted 1 astronaut per launch. Then came Gemini, hosting 2. Finally, Apollo, designed for 3 astronauts to go to the moon and back. It was a rapid, highly reactive escalation directly driven by the Soviet threat, heavily relying on active and retired military personnel to actually get the job done.
Yet despite those raw geopolitical Cold War motivations driving the whole thing, something kind of magical happened when Apollo 11 actually touched down. The plaque left on the moon by Neil Armstrong, Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins in 1969 didn't declare that America conquered the moon. It delivered this incredibly honest, unifying message: we came in peace for all mankind. And the world received them exactly that way. People didn't say America did it. They looked at the astronauts and said, we humans did it. It entirely transcended the political fear that originally funded it and became a true triumph of the human mind.
Section 3. The Lost Decades. The Post-1972 Era.
Okay, so here's the absolute million-dollar question. Actually, scratch that. It's the multi-billion-dollar question. If the US decisively won the race in 1969, why did they suddenly park their spaceships in 1972? People back then fully assumed that by 1980, humanity would be walking on Mars, and by the year 2000, there'd be thousands of us living in space colonies. But the absolute reality is incredibly simple. No more geopolitical threat equaled no more lunar missions. Without the Soviet Union breathing down their necks in a lunar race, the motivation just vanished. It really proves that, historically at least, the approach to space has been incredibly reactive rather than proactive.
Let's jump ahead a bit to 2004. A White House commission appointed by George W. Bush studied the future of NASA, and they actually laid out a very clear, pragmatic path to return to the moon and then continue right on to Mars. Sounded great, but then budget analysts got a hold of the plan and they slapped a terrifying $1 trillion sticker shock right on the front of it. Without the forcing function of a geopolitical rival, that massive number killed the entire dream
dead on arrival. But if you actually break down the math here, it's honestly incredibly frustrating. At the time, NASA's baseline budget was roughly $30 billion a year, and the estimate was that it would take 30 years to get to Mars. Well, 30 billion times 30 years is $900 billion, so essentially $1 trillion. This wasn't necessarily massive, crazy new spending, it was really just the existing budget stretched over 3 decades. But in peacetime, without an enemy threat pushing us, the pure optics of hearing $1 trillion is more than enough to stop exploration dead in its tracks.
Moving on to Section 4, the new space race, the modern era. Fast forward to today, where a brand new geopolitical catalyst has dramatically restarted the engines. Following the Cold War, the US actually partnered with Russia to build the International Space Station, which was a genuinely beautiful act of diplomacy. However, China was explicitly excluded from this partnership, with the US citing a record of human rights violations. So, what was the unintended consequence of isolating a nation with a massively booming economy? Well, China simply decided to birth and fund a fully independent space program all on its own.
And China started executing exactly what they promised they would do. They began putting their taikonauts, which is the Chinese term for astronauts, by the way, into orbit. They built their very own space station. And when they went to the moon, they didn't just leave a fabric flag that would eventually bleach white in the harsh sun. No, they planted a permanent flag literally stitched out of ultraviolet-resistant volcanic basalt rock. They sent a loud, totally clear message of permanence. When China announced they wanted to put taikonauts on the moon, the US suddenly sat up perfectly straight. Under President Trump, NASA was tasked to return to the moon via the brand new Artemis program. And when President Biden took office, he didn't cancel it as some political vanity project, he sustained it. This beautifully illustrates a core, undeniable truth of space exploration. When you are reacting to a perceived international threat, geopolitics rides high above local politics. Bipartisan support magically emerges when there's a rival on the horizon.
Section 5. Who owns space? Cosmic borders. So, as humanity prepares to leave Earth again, we are literally taking our terrestrial rivalries directly into the cosmos. The United States is trying to establish a framework for this new era, primarily through something called the Artemis Accords. This is essentially a document of behavior and ethics for the future of space exploration. The main goal here? Transparency. If a sovereign nation learns something up there that could put future astronauts at risk, they are committed to sharing those results so everyone stays safe. The beautiful idea here is that even if nations travel to space separately, the open sharing of scientific data means humanity is effectively exploring together. But, and you probably saw this coming, a stark division is now unfolding. Russia and China have explicitly chosen not to sign the Artemis Accords. Instead, they've gone ahead and formed their own exclusive pact to establish shared base stations on the lunar surface and in lunar orbit, and they are actively inviting other countries to join their alternative coalition. So we are currently watching the terrestrial borders and alliances present down here on Earth get copy-pasted right onto the moon.
Which leaves us with this final, honestly mind-boggling thought to ponder. Earth is just a tiny, fragile speck in an incredibly vast universe. As we push out into the boundless, awe-inspiring expanse of astrophysics, why are we still so unbelievably obsessed with drawing borders in the stars? Will we ever explore space simply because it's there? Or will we forever need a rival to push us into the unknown? Think about that next time you look at the night sky. Thank you so much for joining this explainer, and as always, keep looking up.